I'm Femi OK. Today on the stream, a private immigration detention center in the U.S. state of Georgia is closing down because of complaints about abuse and neglect. This is Wendy's story.
I'm Wendy Navarro. I was born in Houston, Jamaica. I have 4 U.S. children. I lived in the U.S. over 20 years, and I went to Irwin County Detention Center in September 28th of 2018, and I survived medical abuse. I survived physical abuse. I survived mental abuse, and I am a survivor.
Detainees at an immigration center being survivors. We are digging deeper into this story. If you're joining us live on YouTube, jump into the comment section, be part of today's program. Our guests will be delighted to answer your questions. Let us meet the guests. Jaromy, Elora, Setere, nice to see all of you. Jaromy, please introduce yourself to our international audience. Tell them who you are and how you're connected to this story, just briefly.
Yes, my name is Jaromy Navarro, and I was one of the first women to speak up about the abuse, and I'm 29 years old. I'm from Mexico.
So good to have you. Elora, please introduce yourself to our stream audience.
My name is Elora Mukherjee. I'm a professor at Columbia Law School and one of the lawyers working to represent the brave women who organized to tell the truth about medical abuses at the Irwin County Detention Center.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Setere, good to have you here on the stream. Introduce yourself to our international audience.
Thanks for having me. My name is Setere Gandahari. I'm the Advocacy Director at Detention Watch Network.
The reason we brought all three of our guests together and wanted to share this story with you was because of a new Fault Lines documentary. It's called No Consent. It tells the story of what happened at the Irwin Detention Center. Have a look.
Black and brown immigrant women at the mercy of the private prison corporation.
Fault Lines investigates allegations of medical abuse of women held at a privately run immigration detention facility in rural Georgia.
You still don't know what happened?
Sign here, sign there, you don't have a chance to read everything.
An ordeal exposed by a nurse turned whistleblower.
I would blow the whistle 1,000 times over if I had to.
No Consent, surgery scandal in immigrant detention on Al Jazeera.
You know, I'm just trying to think when I hear the stories that have come out of this immigration center, incredible abuses, human rights abuses. What is going on in the private detention centers anywhere in the United States that should give us concern?
Yeah, I think the main thing to note here, right, is that Irwin, unfortunately and sadly, is not unique. And it's not just private detention. It's all of the detention centers across the country, whether they're private, whether they are local and county jails, whether they are run by the federal government. There have been countless reports from advocates, including Detention Watch Network and many others over the years. You know, the government's own inspectors have documented physical, sexual abuse, medical negligence, really throughout the U.S. immigration detention system across the country. So this is really a big problem. And the fact that we were able to get this win at Irwin because of the bravery of women like Jaromy is a huge, huge victory. And I'm just so honored to be here with her.
Wow. Jaromy, if you were trying to explain to our international audience what it was like being in the Irwin detention facility, how would you describe life there before we even get to the terrible things that happened to you?
Life there is dead. It's literally, you're surrounded by dead. You know, everything is just negative and dark. There is no light, sunlight from natural sun. You know, it's horrible. It's very bad conditions. Negative and just the environment, the area, everything is negative. It's not good.
And just to be clear, you're not in prison. You're not there because you did something illegal. How would you explain what landed you in the detention facility in the first place?
I believe what landed me in Irwin County was a purpose. And I believe that's why I ended up in Irwin County Detention Center for Immigrants for a purpose. And for this, there was a lot of abuse going on.
Let's start talking about some of this abuse, Elora. If you could lay out where these complaints of neglect and abuse started from, this particular facility in Georgia. Can you help us understand? Yeah, go ahead.
Starting as early as 2018, lawyers representing women at the Irwin County Detention Center notified both ICE and the private prison corporation LaSalle that women were being abused by the gynecologist who was providing services there. And as early as 2018, lawyers raised an alarm saying that this doctor leaves women traumatized and abused, and they don't want to go back to him. But for years, continuing through last fall, when the whistleblower complaint was filed, women kept being brought to this gynecologist, and woman after woman after woman was subjected to non-consensual, medically unnecessary gynecological procedures and surgeries. So surgeries and procedures that they did not need, surgeries and procedures that left them in trauma and in pain, lasting to this day. Now, what happened is that the women, brave women like Jaromy, organized inside the prison to shed light on the truth of what was happening. That woman after woman after woman was being abused there.
Jaromy, I'm going to play you a video, and this video is from Priyanka Bhatt. She's a staff attorney at Project South, and they're co-author of the whistleblower complaint. So these abuses were happening. Women were getting medical treatment that they are saying, we did not need this. And then a whistleblower spilled the beans, and these are some of the stories that were beginning to leak out. Have a listen to Priyanka and then pick up. Here we go.
Personally, I will never forget the pure horror and despair in the voices of the people I talked to inside Irwin. Horror from being separated from their families and children. Horror from not receiving HIV and breast cancer medication that their life depended on. Horror from having COVID-19 and not getting help. Horror from being thrown in solitary confinement for filing a complaint or asking for PPE. Horror from not knowing what happened to their own bodies, from waking up with holes in their stomach and not understanding why. And horror from wondering if they too would die inside an ICE detention center, as so many others already have.
That is very true. I do remember every single situation that she mentioned. I was very afraid of dying of COVID. At first, I was afraid of getting infected. I didn't know I was infected, although I complained to the nurses, not just me, but all of us. We were all sick. We complained, and they never listened to us. The neglect of solitary for complaining also was true. I also was solitated for a couple of days for complaining about an inappropriate situation. So all of the above is so real, and just hearing it and seeing the videos and hearing the news of Irwin County shutting down is like almost you're grieving. You know, I feel like they took a lot from me, and however, I'm glad for the personal growth that I have been able to receive. However, I remember the pain, everything.
Yeah, and I just have to say, I can't underscore enough this point around, retaliation. Because ICE and detention center staff are able to act with impunity, the threat of retaliation and abuse when people speak out is very, very real. People are, as she said, put in solitary confinement. Their deportations can be sped up. They're often denied, the most basic necessities and due process when they speak out. Physical force, rubber bullets, pepper spray, these are all very often used, including also force feeding or threats of force feeding hunger strikers. Last year, thousands of people across the detention system took part in hunger strikes to bring attention to the situation they were facing inside because of COVID, the lack of PPE, the lack of testing, the lack of soap. And many of them were subject to these types of retaliations. So it's a real threat.
So as we were putting this show together, we reached out to the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. So you'll hear them, audience around the world, you'll hear them described as ICE. And literally, just as we were about to start the show, their statement came in. So just in time for us to have a look at it. So I am reading it at the same time that you are reading it. So we're going to put it up here for a little while, and I am going to work my way through it. Guess. I want you to actually have a debate with this statement, okay? When you see things that you're concerned about, we are going to discuss it. So, all right, thank you for your patience. Thank you for sending this statement. This statement comes from Tanya Rahman, spokesperson for the Office of Public Affairs at ICE. And they say here that the Irwin County Detention Center, as soon as possible and consistent with any legal obligations, will be closed down. There is an ongoing investigation. Setore, what does that ongoing investigation need to be looking at?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important that they're taking the step, this investigation. The Office of Inspector General is investigating these allegations at Irwin County. And we do hope that the results of the investigation, we expect them to confirm what advocates and people in detention have already shared. But this is not the first investigation of its kind. There have been countless investigations from the Office of Inspector General, countless reports, countless inspections throughout the system. So, we're glad the inspection is happening, but we already know what needs to happen. Irwin's, the closing of Irwin, as well as Bristol County, which was announced at the same time, these need to be first steps. And we need to see more of these detention centers shutting down. Inspections are not enough and have never gotten us there. We need to start thinking of a different way and phasing out the use of detention entirely.
Let's go back to that ICE statement, because I saw you leaning forward. There's something here that I wanted to ask you about. All detainees must receive access to appropriate medical care, and medical care decisions should be made by medical personnel. What was your experience, Jaromy?
Correct. I did experience lies and confusion on my way to surgery, and it was a bad experience, to be honest with you. It was scary. The first time I met Dr. Amin, he said I needed surgery. The very first time he ever met me, he said, you need surgery because you have a cyst on your right ovary. I've had 2 kids. I was 27 at the time, and I had never heard of a cyst. So I was very surprised when he told me that. Also, I was surprised when he gave me a shot. He said it was for hormones, that it would, make the cyst go away. And all this time I had so many questions like, well, what if I get deported or released before? How do we finish the process? And I said to myself, okay, well, then I guess we'll see each other in 3 months for the next shot. However, he missed it. He missed that 3rd month shot. And I was just in shock at that time, because he should have had his notes in his computer. He should have known that the 3rd month mark was coming up if he was so interested to remove a cyst with hormones. I did have some side effects from the shot that I had never experienced. He said he gave me a depot shot. I am American. I am very American, and I've had depot shots in my past life, and I never had a whole month bleeding or pain experience. And it was scary because it was dark colored blood. And so it was scary to me, honestly. And not to mention, when it came down to my surgery date that was scheduled for July 31st, and when I found out I had antibodies for COVID, I never knew that I could have died, Yeah. So I was in shock at that time when the nurse stated, and I quote, Dr. Amin is going to be pissed because he can't do the surgery. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm sorry. Do I have COVID? I was confused. Isolation for COVID was so unsanitary. No chemicals. It's just ridiculous. No, the officers wouldn't clean. I mean, it was dirty. How would they pass the food if they're not cleaning? So I'm just, it was just not well. None of the conditions that they had me in were not well. Not to mention, I told them I don't want the surgery after July 31st. They tried to give me a second surgery August 14th, and I denied it because Miss Hughes's story was not adding up. She told me
So Jaromy,
that
if I may, because to go through what you went through is going to take us a lot longer than we have on the stream. So what I picked up from your story that shocked me and brought me back to the history of experimentation on black and brown people in the United States was that you came to the doctor with cramps and the doctor was planning on giving you a hysterectomy that you had no idea was going to happen. I'm going to leave it there because people can follow more of your story by watching the Fault Lines episode, No Consent. But just hear that, audience, because that is shocking. I'm going to go to YouTube. Sherry Wirtz, this is totally horrific. It almost seems like it was pre-planned by the government. I am so tired of all these innocent people being so victimized. Elora, instant response to Sherry's comment. Go ahead, very briefly.
The horrific abuse at the Irwin County Detention Center is shocking. It is stomach-turning. It's awful. And simply closing down the detention center is not enough. All of the women who survived medical abuse at the Irwin County Detention Center deserve a path to legal immigration status. All of the women who were deported in retaliation for speaking out about the medical abuse, like Jaromy, deserve to be back in the United States with their families, with their U.S. citizen children. And there must be a meaningful investigation to unearth all of the complicity in the system, from ICE officers to the private contractors who allowed this abuse to take place for years.
This is Sai Cruz. Sai, thank you for being part of this program. Setere, Sai was wondering, are all of the women going to win the case in the class action lawsuit? What is your feeling here?
Well, I can't tell the future. I certainly believe that they deserve to win, and they deserve much more than that. They deserve justice. They deserve knowing that this isn't going to happen to other women. They deserve knowing that, you know, migrants are going to be respected in this country, that we can welcome people with dignity, that we can treat people with dignity. So these women need to get some form of justice through the court system, and then we need to fight so that no one else experiences this again.
Laura, I am wondering where politics comes into what is happening at these private detention immigration centres around the United States. This is one particularly horrible situation in Georgia, but there are many detention centres and private ones, facilities around the United States. This is Diego here. Diego raises a really interesting question about the politics of these private detention facilities. Have a listen to Diego, Elora, and then respond to him.
The closure of the Irwin County Detention Center is definitely a victory for all the detained folks who have decided to speak up against the abuses happening at this facility, for all the formerly detained folks at Irwin who have been organizing to shut this place down, and for all the organizers and advocates in the state of Georgia who have been fighting for this issue for many years. It's definitely a victory for them, but this is only a step in the right direction for the Biden administration, who now needs to release everyone who is still detained at the Irwin County Detention Center, and needs to recognize that these types of abuses are not isolated and that they have been happening all over the country, and that immigrant prisons need to be shut down. The Biden administration has a mandate to shut these places down for good.
Diego is absolutely right. The Irwin County Detention Center is emblematic of the types of horrific abuses that take place in ICE detention nationwide. There is no need for an immigration detention system. Everyone in immigration detention should be released safely into the community.
I am looking at YouTube right now, Jaromy, and I'm looking at anti-immigrant sentiment. People are upset and they're saying, why are you complaining? You're getting care. Who knows what might happen in your developing world country? There is some prejudice coming out of this YouTube conversation. And what worries me is that everybody who's in the care of the United States should not necessarily or should not feel unsafe in that care. That was my reaction to those comments. What is your reaction to those comments?
You know what? I believe that my utmost respect and love goes for all of those people who would respond to such a thing because they've never been through it. And that's my response. You've never been through it. And so until you do, you might want to speak up because you're from America. And in America, they teach us to speak up.
In the documentary No Consent, which is debuting later on today, that's Wednesday, 22 hours 30 GMT, and you can also watch it online. I will tell people where they can watch it online. Your little girl makes an appearance, and I want to share her with the world because Monica, who was the correspondent, asked your little girl about you because when you revealed what was happening at the detention facility, you were very swiftly deported. And so now you are in one country, your little girl is in the United States, you're not together. This is what your little girl had to say about that.
We have so much memories with her, and those make me cry all the time. So if we can just have more memories and play together with my little sister, it would be amazing.
Of course. That'd be amazing. And what would you do if you see her? What's the first thing you would do?
I would hug her really tight.
Jaromy, this way that you spoke out, you stood up for yourself and for other women. Would you ever think about taking that back, rethinking where that got you, or would you have been deported anyway?
I would speak up 1,000 times over again. I would have never kept my mouth shut because it's pain that I had never experienced, but when I did, it was hurtful. It could have lost your mind.
Setare, I did mention how many other private facilities, immigration facilities there are around the United States. I'm just looking right here on my laptop, mapping US immigration detention. As the ICE statement really looks at, it's like this is not the behavior that a US agency should be displaying. This is not good practice. Is there a way that you can look at these detention centers around the US and say, these should be best practices? We have learned from the Irwin facility, and now we need to make sure that detainees are protected.
Yes, I mean, as Laura said before, there's actually zero need for a detention system at all. So best practice is to close them all down. You know, as we've all mentioned, you know, detention is cruel, but it's not only cruel, it's completely unnecessary. Most people who are detained in the United States in the immigration system have communities. They have loved ones in the United States to house them and support them and help them navigate their immigration cases. You know, for the small number that don't, there are networks of shelters and services, particularly along the border, but really across the country, that can provide services and are prepared and willing and able to do that. You know, studies have shown that the vast majority of people who are released attend their court hearings. So even, you know, this is often used as the justification. They have to go to court. We can't make them go to court unless we detain them. And it's simply not true. And in fact, you know, nearly 100% of immigrants with lawyers attend their hearings. So our message is allow people to be in community with their loved ones, with the support of their networks, offer support to those that need it, and provide access to legal counsel. That's really all we need to do. And we need to shutter every single one of these facilities across the country.
Setare and Elora and Jaromy, thank you so much for being part of this program. Jaromy, in particular, I wish that your family is reunited as soon as possible. Thank you for sharing your painful experience with us on the stream. We really appreciate it. Let me show you where you can see No Consent, the latest film from AJ Fortlines. You can watch it online right now at Fortlines, online at aljazeera.com. And also it premieres this week, Wednesday, 22:30 GMT on Al Jazeera English. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you, guests. Thank you for the YouTube comments. I'll see you next time. Take care.